Hello whisky fans, welcome back. I've got a little puzzle for you. This is our next of the new distillery releases that I'm going to be looking at. This is Glasgow 1770 from the, I think they call it the Glasgow Distillery Company. Nice big box, isn't it? Compared to the Rassay and the Loch Lee and stuff, especially compared to that Loch Lee. Huge box. Just get the bottle out. Fancy, slightly Art Deco bottle. Nice bottle. Tall bottle. What do you notice about this bottle? Well, they've done a very good job, this is one of their early releases, of disguising the fact that this is not a 700ml full bottle. It's a very tall bottle and it's slightly out of round as well, which makes it look wider when you look at it from the front. But this is actually a 500ml bottle, and this was the case with all of their early batches. And this is obviously the one that I bought. I buy all of these with my own money. I'm not working on freebies or kickbacks or anything like that. And this one, it sells for just over £50, which £45–50 is about what almost all of these new releases cost. But when you consider that this is a 500ml instead of a 700, it makes it one of the most expensive whiskies out of all of these new distilleries, up there with the astronomically expensive Daft Mill and Annandale, which is cask strength and single cask generally. So yeah, 500ml of this at £50 makes it very expensive. To their credit, the people at the Glasgow Distilling Company, they probably realised that they were charging a little bit above the odds, and absolutely to their credit, if you buy a recent batch of this, they're actually selling it in a 700ml bottle for the same price that I paid for this 500 a few months ago, which kind of puts everything right. It makes it the same price as almost all of these other releases, same prices than at Neen and the Rassay and Ardnamurchan, all of those. But what I will say, if you're looking at buying a bottle of this, especially if you're buying from somewhere that has old stock, make sure that it's a 700 before you buy it. So Glasgow 1770 from the Glasgow Distillery is obviously another lowland whisky, being absolute explosion in the amount of new distilleries popping up in the lowlands, including Bladnoch reopening. And I do have a little bit of a problem with the branding that they've got here. They're calling their original, and I think a few of their other releases, Glasgow 1770. Now, 1770 is the founding year of the original Glasgow Distilling Company that closed around a century before the current company was set up. Now, I think that's a little bit dishonest. I think that they're also kind of pushing their luck with the SWA by putting a number front and centre in massive font on the label that's neither the founding year of the distillery nor anything related to the age of the whisky. And we'll see that there's a similar situation to this with the Lindor's whisky when I get around to reviewing that. But I can see this confusing some people, because a lot of people are rightly going to assume that this company, this distillery, was founded in 1770. There's also the possibility that some less informed people might think that this whisky is from 1770. But for the more informed whisky drinkers between you and me, the actual founding year of this modern company was 2012, and they began production in 2015. So details on the label on this one, obviously it's a 500ml bottle. It's bottled at 46%, which is the gold standard for whisky, so thumbs up for that one. It's obviously produced in Glasgow. It's matured in first fill ex-bourbon casks and finished in virgin oak. It's also, I'm pleased to say, natural colour and non-chill filtered, which is actually stated on the back label. Let's try to get that in focus. So anyone that's interested, you can pause and have a look at that. I'll show you the front as well. It's a nice little still logo at the top, Glasgow 1770. This is the original, as they're calling it. So I basically picked this one because I wanted a kind of representation of the standard house style. I didn't want the peated one because that's going to cover up a lot of the actual distillery character. There's also a triple distilled version of this, but I've gone for basically the normal standard one. So let's get some in the glass. Very fancy stopper on this one. Quite a hefty stopper. I'm not sure what that's made of. I would assume probably plastic, but it's got a decent heft to it. But Glasgow Distillery Company, 1770 again on there with their still. Nice stopper. Probably keep that one. I like that. Going to run out of room here very quickly. So yeah, that is natural colour. So I think I'm probably fairly safe in saying that a lot of the colour that you're seeing there is probably coming through from that finishing period in the virgin oak. So Glasgow 1770, the original, on the nose. So immediately, the first thing that really jumps out on this one, I'm sure it'll jump out to all of you, is it's a very spicy whiskey. It's really textbook new oak, warming spices, lots of freshly sawn oak, heavy ginger, cinnamon, cardamom, nutmeg, pepper, black pepper, very peppery wood spice, as well as some creamy vanilla, again coming through from the ASB bourbon casks and the virgin oak finishing, sawdust. But under all of those very heavy new oak spicy notes, there's also some really nice bright citrus notes coming through from the spirit, some lemon and lime, a little bit of a lemongrass note, but really it's very much about that new oak. Let's see how it tastes. So on the palate, it's a nice whiskey. I think if this stuff had been a bit cheaper, I would be a lot happier about it. I think that something like this, if it was £30, I'd be very much happier about the experience that I'm personally getting out of this. I think some people will like this a lot more than I do, especially bourbon drinkers. Anyone that's mostly into bourbon that's looking to get into Scotch, this is probably a really good one to do that with. But for me, it's a little bit too heavy on the oak. On the palate, I'm getting some notes of salty and sweet licorice. There's a little bit of a wine gums, jelly babies notes, so jelly-based confectionery. Some more of that bright citrus note that I got on the nose, but it really quickly descends into more of that dry, planky wood spice note. On the palate, it's also slightly herbal and grassy. Strong notes of wood spice and cardamom, quite a bit of bitterness, but really lots and lots of oak spice and freshly sawn oak. As for the finish, this one is a reasonably short finish, sweet and salty, with a little bit of caramel and jelly sweets, and more of that bitter oak and oak spice. I think if I was tasting this blind, I would almost certainly think that this was a bourbon, because it's got that degree of oak influence in it, along with the sweetness coming through from the spirit. It really does seem like more of an American thing. And I understand why these new distilleries use these, in my opinion, slightly heavy-handed cask treatments, because it can cover up a multitude of sins. If you've got a whiskey which is noticeably young, then there's nothing wrong with that. If you've got a whiskey which is 3 years old because your distillery has been operating for 3, 4, 5 years, then that's what you're going to be selling. But obviously a lot of people are critical of these new distilleries and they don't want youth in their whiskey. So I can understand the temptation to apply an STR cask or a wine cask or virgin oak, as they have done here, to try and hide a little bit of that youth, to save themselves from the grief that they're going to get from some people. But I do kind of wish that I could just see more of the base spirit, because from what I can taste of this, it is good. It's got that lovely bright, fruity, light and delicate, but also quite juicy and refined character. And I really want to see more of that without being covered up by that virgin oak, because I think that the spirit in this one really does show lots of promise. I think it's an interesting whiskey and it's got lots of character, and as I said before, I think this is probably a good one for anyone that's really into their bourbon. Anything that this is similar to, this might be something that a lot of people are not familiar with, but this really reminds me of a lot of the whiskies coming out of Adnams Distillery. So that's the distillery, I think they call it Copper House Distillery or something like that. It's in Southwold where they make the good beer. But down in Southwold at Adnams, they're using a lot of virgin oak in their whiskies as well, which means that their whiskies tend to come out with this heavily oak spiced flavour profile too. So if you're a fan of that, this is also another good one for you to try. As for a grade, I'm going to give this one a C-. So this is all based in my preference, like all of these reviews are, because everyone's different and everyone likes different things. But for me, this is not the sort of thing that I generally go for. Like I've said a million times now, I really would like to see a lot more of the spirit rather than the cask. But still, I think as a distillery it shows promise, and I'm going to mark this one as the bottom end of what I would call good. And that's almost entirely down to that finishing period in the virgin oak. As I said before, there is a triple distilled version of this. I haven't tried that, and I probably will in future, because I think that triple distilled version hasn't got the virgin oak treatment. And I think that a triple distillation mixed with that bright, light and fruity spirit will probably work really, really well. And going forwards, I'll definitely try this one again if they come out with a slightly older, maybe 100% bourbon matured version of this, because I'd really like to try a straightforward maturation of this at maybe a slightly higher age without the virgin oak. As always, hope you've enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think of this one if you've tried. If you've tried any of the Glasgow range, let me know what you think. If you have tried that triple distilled version, is it better than this? Is that something that I should look at? I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for watching, and cheers.